Thank you.
With respect, could you explain your gun control policy to the parents of the victims of school shootings?
I could. We have a Second Amendment and right to bear arms, essentially. And I'm very strongly an advocate of that. I think you need that. I think that if you ever tried to get rid of it, you wouldn't be able to do it. You wouldn't be able to take away the guns because people need that for security. They need it for entertainment and for sport and other things. But
I'm talking to Adam Mockler today. Anyone who watches this channel by now knows exactly who Adam is, but I wanted to get your reaction, Adam, to this insane reply by the former president, because this issue, gun safety, gun reform, has, as much as any other issue, helped define the political activism of your generation. What did you make of the former president's response?
Yeah, first of all, if we put aside Donald Trump's inability to answer, I mean, that is the obvious part. That is a low-hanging fruit. But there's a nuanced position that you can take on this that no Republicans seem to be taking. I'm somebody that honestly is okay with people owning guns in America. I think it's fundamental to being an American. It's part of our culture. But at the same time, there needs to be some sort of common sense mechanisms to make sure the people aren't getting their hands on high powered rifles and then taking them into places they shouldn't be. Now, I remember I grew up in an era where since fourth grade, I'd like to say, we did school shooting drills every single year. Starting after Sandy Hook, we'd have to do school shooting drills. We'd hide in the corner of the classroom, lock the door and turn off the lights and like pull the shades down. And that was our school shooting drill. So clearly something needs to be done because America has a unique problem with gun violence. But Trump isn't taking that nuanced position. Trump literally brought up entertainment and sport. He completely deflected. He word saladed. Is that a word? Word salad. It was just absolutely insane.
Yeah. It was insane, but it's a reflection of the Republican Party's approach to this. I mean, you listen to how J.D. Vance talks about gun safety and gun reform. He says we need to harden things. That should be our approach. We should lock the doors. But there was a shooting. I did a show on it on a beach. How do you lock the doors to a beach? And I just feel like the Democrats are on the verge of regaining the high road on this issue, even in the wake of the assassination attempts, which, by the way, were carried out by Republicans or right-leaning fanatics using guns that Democrats didn't want them to have. I mean, if we can get that message through that this political violence, even when it's directed towards Republicans, is the fault of the amped up rhetoric on the right and the gun fetishization on the right, I think Dems can regain this issue.
And I think Kamala Harris and Tim Walz are doing a great job because they said something similar to what I said earlier. They are gun owners. I mean, Tim Walz goes trap shooting. He's just a normal American dude, and he doesn't want to abuse these weapons. You know, something interesting. I talk to these Trump supporters at rallies, and I always cite this specific example. I might have the details slightly off because it was a while ago, but about 2 years ago, someone walked into a restaurant in Maine and killed 19 people. And this man had told people before that he had schizophrenic voices in his head, that he had urges to commit a mass shooting, that he had access to weapons. He had said this. So I just ask Trump supporters a simple question. Do you think there should be a mechanism in place to make sure someone like that shouldn't have access to a gun? It's a pretty easy concession. You have to be crazy to say no, right? They most of the time say yes. So you can inch them towards that position of understanding that, hey, you can be a responsible gun owner and say that you shouldn't have access to these weapons. But then they've psyoped themselves into thinking that Joe Biden's going to break down your door personally and steal your guns out of your safe, you know?
I want to talk about your approach to political messaging, your willingness to go into the lion's den and go to these Trump rallies and talk to the MAGA faithful face to face. For those who aren't familiar with Adam Mockler in the wild, I want to roll this clip.
Donald Trump said the election was going to be stolen before it happened, and then on election night, he prematurely declared victory when the votes weren't even counted. He then took 60 different court cases, lost every single court case. Then Bill Barr, Mike Pence, Ivanka Trump all said there's no election fraud. So who do you trust more than our courts, our institutions? Rudy Giuliani? What's your source of election fraud is my question.
I saw actual data that night. I watched that election for 12 straight hours.
Why did the courts reject that data?
Because I think that some of the courts are false as well.
But they were Trump-appointed judges, so Trump-appointed fake judges, or what?
You got to look at all the data.
We've looked at all the data. All the data says the election was legitimate.
So it's your word against mine. It's whatever you want to believe.
Wait, can I say? Wait, no. Can I say real quick? It's my.
We live in the United States. Everybody has their own opinion.
Yeah.
That's what it's about.
Well, can I say? You say it's your word against mine, but it's my word, our court's words, the FBI, the DOJ, Bill Barr, Mike Pence versus you, Trump, and Rudy Giuliani, and Mike Lindell. So do you think Rudy Giuliani?
A lot more people than
Do you think Rudy Giuliani is?
The DOJ, the FBI, in my opinion, are corrupt.
But Bill Barr.
Whatever they're telling
Who
you.
appointed Bill Barr though? Trump appointed all of these
And then
people.
He fired them. He fired people.
So he's hires the best people, but he hires them and then fires them immediately, right?
Good, because he found out the
People
truth about
deserve
them.
to get fired. I'm sorry, you shouldn't be placed in a position because of what you know or who you know. You should be placed in a position because you qualify
So
for
you have
that.
no evidence that the election was stolen beyond feelings.
Oh no.
So, Adam, you have a rare gift for this kind of interaction. I am wondering if part of the chemistry that you're able to establish with these Trump supporters is due to the fact that you're young, that they feel like they can talk to you, that they don't immediately put their guard up. To what do you attribute your rare ability to have these kinds of conversations?
First of all, thank you. I appreciate that. But what you said, I think, was pretty spot on. I've still got sort of a baby face, which makes me more affable in person, you know? And then, so there's a few things going on there. Number one, we're pretty good at disarming them before. So when I walk up to someone, I say, hey, I run a YouTube channel. I'm a college student. We're here to create conversation. They immediately are like, yeah, let's create conversation. And then as the interview goes on, I slowly start to push back. And I think by the time they realize that I'm a bleeding heart liberal, I'm a big Kamala fan, I think that they already like me a little bit. You know, so I'm good at like disarming them in that way. And then also I grew up in Indiana. I go to college in Chicago now, but I grew up in Indiana. So naturally I grew up around a lot of Republicans. Even my friends' parents were always Republicans when I go over to their house. So I used to have conversations with my friends' parents when I was a young age, or when I was young, right? And I feel like that kind of laid the groundwork for how I can talk to people and not be super pissy or condescending. You know, I have liberal friends that get pretty condescending pretty quickly, and I try to stay away from that at Trump rallies. And I think that goes a long way, to be honest.
I think your interviews are incredibly effective, not just in communicating to audiences like this about how the MAGA movement thinks, but you're persuasive. And I'm getting at a larger, more important story than the entertainment value of your videos, which is the way your generation has stepped up. People like you, people like Olivia Juliana and David Hogue and Xander Morris, folks we've had on this show. I think you're ushering in a sea change in how political journalism works that the legacy media hasn't quite figured out yet, or hasn't even come close to figuring out. They don't even appreciate the air quotes threat. How do you read that?
You know what's cool though is I feel like we're all kind of doing that. Not only the Gen Zers, but you, who broke into the scene with this insane documentary that legitimized the digital space in a way. And also, we're already legit, is what I'm saying. But you broke out, and then also everybody watching this right now is contributing to this new digital space that we're taking over. And I think Gen Zers really have stepped up just due to our most formative years being taken up by Trump in the news cycle. So if you can imagine going through like middle school and high school, Trump was elected when I was in 8th grade, which sounds wild, right? But like all through my high school, even through my college years, it's all about Trump. So I think that does kind of plant a seed in young people's minds that, okay, we can change these institutions. Something is fundamentally wrong. And so really quickly, just touch back on it. I mean, this entire landscape is being changed by everybody watching this who's contributing, all the Meidas Mighty, people like Ken, and then also all the Gen Zers that are going hard too.
It's Ken Harbaugh. Quick break here to remind everyone, if you haven't yet subscribed to the podcast version of this show, please do. The link is below. And don't forget to rate and review. It makes a huge difference in how the algorithm ranks shows. Thanks for the support. You said that there's an awareness that something is fundamentally wrong? I want to interrogate that a little bit, because my fear is that an entire generation of new voters, my daughter is 19 now. She's going to vote in her first presidential in November. Guess who she's voting for? But they have grown up thinking in some, well, this is my question for you. Is there a temptation to think that this is normal? I mean, all you've known is a political reality in which Trump is the center of attention. By definition, that's normalized. That really worries me, that there isn't, or there may not be, an historical appreciation for what a healthy, stable American politics should look like.
Yeah, it's interesting. There's a lot of dynamics at play here. So if I'm going to be 100% honest, I think sometimes Gen Zers can talk about our generation in a misleading way. Like we're a monolith. We are all behind Kamala Harris. That's not true. We have a lot of diverse sects within Gen Z. So most of us are overwhelmingly progressive. You ask most Gen Zers if they believe in marriage equality. Of course. Climate change. Of course they believe in that. Wealth redistribution. Of course. But that being said, there's a sect that are so anti-establishment, that are so disillusioned with our establishments for a good reason, because they grew up in this Trump era and they think everything needs to be torn down. Let's say that's a small sect of our generation. We also have the sect of MAGA people. I mean, there are a lot of Republican-brained Gen Zers. I don't know how to word this, but I have so many friends that watch UFC. They don't know anything about politics, but they watch Trump walk into UFC with his fist pumping and they vote based on that. That's a non-negligible section of Gen Zers who watch Theo Vaughn, probably going to watch the Joe Rogan podcast. And then I'd say the bulk of Gen Zers are progressive and understand that our institutions can be preserved and that we can work within them someday. So when you reference David Hogg, for example, he's a prime example of a really clever Gen Zer who understands that if we preserve our institutions, we can someday work within them. Even if it's 20 years from now, we're going to be handed the keys to these institutions, and then we'll be able to pass climate change legislation. We'll be able to pass gun reform. We'll be able to have wealth redistribution. Everything that we need can be passed, but MAGA threatens that. So to answer your question, to bring it back broadly really quickly, there is a section of Gen Z that wants to see our institutions crumble. I mean, there's a section of Gen Z that's not going to vote purposefully, that's going to abstain, that disagrees with Kamala Harris on foreign policy or for one reason or another. So yeah, I mean, I do just want to say Gen Z is pretty diverse in their thought.
Absolutely. And if I'm painting with a broad brush, I don't mean to, because
no, not you.
Yeah.
I do that too, man. Like I sometimes will say Gen Z is going to elect Kamala, but like to be real, there's a very diverse. Yeah,
for sure. Should we be operating in those spaces like Joe Rogan and Theo Vaughn and UFC, where we can reach that element that has its doubts about the importance of institutions and even the possibility of progress? I mean, my whole mindset is that the project of government should be to advance humanity and human flourishing, and that's what makes me a progressive by definition. But there are those, I think, overrepresented in these spaces, Joe Rogan audience members, UFC fans, who think that it's better to start from scratch and just tear everything down. Is it worthwhile to go there and talk to them?
I've been walking around this for a while and haven't been saying what I think, but I'm going to bite the bullet. Get Kamala Harris on Joe Rogan right now. Get her on Joe Rogan. I think that was only confirmed by her Brett Baer interview last night. So here's what I think of it. I was like, Joe Rogan won't be able to push back in a more effective way than Brett Baer. Brett Baer was probably like the hardest debate she'll have. But also, Joe Rogan will have even more eyes than Fox News. I can almost guarantee a Joe Rogan appearance would blow up. So here's what you have. Minimal pushback, a lot of eyes, a platform with a bunch of undecided or swingable voters. You're not going to lose any liberals. We already hate Trump. We're going to vote for Kamala no matter what. But you can gain some of these people that are disillusioned, that don't even know what Kamala Harris sounds like. They've only seen clips or they don't know any of her policies. It's a great opportunity. I'll take it one step further. And now I'm just like wish casting like it's the West Wing, like I'm Aaron Sorkin writing right here. But what if she challenged Joe Rogan not Joe Rogan. What if she challenged Donald Trump to a debate on Joe Rogan and there's two outcomes? He says no. Donald Trump says no. And then Joe Rogan calls that out and says, yeah, Trump actually like declined. It was really weird. We thought he was tough, but he's not. Or Trump says yes. And this is a man who can't even keep a coherent thought lately. So it's a win-win. But again, that's like Aaron Sorkin wishcasting. But to answer your broader question, which is it worth it reaching to people who are disillusioned with our institutions? Yes, because I have this idea that you can talk to most of these people and they have fundamentally liberal ideas. Joe Rogan believes in climate change. I've heard him argue in favor of climate change, in favor of he knows systemic racism exists. He is in favor of marriage equality. I'm not trying to run defense for Joe Rogan. I'm just saying this is a man who you can probably reach if you talk to him.
Yeah. So glad to hear you say that. I believe it wholeheartedly. We not only can, but should operate in these spaces and will tend to win. I mean, if you need any evidence of that, just look at Pete Buttigieg, wherever he goes, Fox News especially, and I think VP Harris could do the same thing.
Can I just say an anecdotal story? I have friends in a group chat from high school. I graduated in 2021 in Indiana from high school. So I'm in a group chat with some Republican friends, some liberal friends. We're always debating stuff, especially as election season nears. And one of my Republican, lifelong Republican friends, lifelong meaning like 22 years old, but he's a lifelong Republican. He said the Mark Cuban Theo Vaughn podcast changed the way he looks at politics. He only listens to Theo Vaughn. That's honestly the only way he consumes like news or comedy. And that's fine. He's a busy dude. He just listens to the Theo Vaughn podcast. And that leads him to be a little bit right-wing coded because Theo Vaughn constantly has these like right-wing coded guests. So when he listened to Mark Cuban tear Trump down, he texted in our group chat, Mark Cuban just changed the way I look at politics. Is Trump really this deranged? And it's like, yes. Get in those spaces. Pete Buttigieg always says when he goes on Fox News, he knows that the people watching aren't bad people. They're just misled.
Awesome. We're gonna outro with your video convincing that Trump supporter to change his mind on Ukraine. But I gotta ask you about Project 2025 first, because there's a million things in it that I have a huge problem with. I mean, it's 970 odd pages of just darkness for America, from deconstructing the VA to abolishing NOAA and FEMA and agencies that we absolutely depend on in moments like this. But for Gen Z, you have the most at stake. This is existential. How is your generation, who has the most to lose from a future being mortgaged to indulge in our selfishness of the moment, how are you responding to Project 2025 and what it wants to do to the American project?
Yeah, let me break down my biggest problem with it. Well, there's so many problems. You pointed to some very, very specific parts of it that are terrifying, but Republicans always say Trump would never actually enact Project 2025, but that is false. One of the key aspects, one of the foundational aspects is a Schedule F executive order that Trump did during his first term. He already did this. So it's not like we're throwing stuff out there. He did this. Biden had to reverse it, and then he even placed some guardrails, so you can't quite do that again. But this Schedule F executive order lays the entire groundwork for Project 2025, lays the entire groundwork for dismantling our institutions, and it seems to be largely inspired by the Viktor Orban model in Hungary. So if you can fill our institutions with loyalists, people not based on merit, not based on their skill, but based on how loyal they are to Donald Trump, then you can endlessly justify tearing these institutions down and giving out pardons to people that help you in the same way he'll pardon the January 6th hostages, right? Or whatever he calls them, patriots, prisoners, whatever he calls them. He wants to pardon them. And I just feel like the Schedule F executive order fills our institutions with these people. Then they break the norms for Trump. Then Trump pardons them as he's appointing loyalists in the FBI and the DOJ. And then at some point, certain instructions start to come down from the Supreme Court or from Congress or from different courts, and Trump just starts to ignore those. What happens when Trump starts to ignore a Supreme Court order? Think about it. Trump has ignored court orders before when he was told to give back documents. And then think about this. After like 5 or 6 Supreme Court orders that Trump ignores, He ignores it. The Supreme Court starts to change its behavior, essentially, to fit how Donald Trump acts, because they realize we're losing power if the president's not listening to us, if Congress isn't listening to us. So then you have the president of the United States, who has the Supreme Court making decisions in his favor, which that's already happening, and also Congress working in his favor, all the civil servants working in his favor. I don't want to be a doomsdayer, but that's Project 2025.
That's Project 2025, and its biggest cheerleader is JD Vance, who, if Trump wins, is a heartbeat away from the presidency. And to your point about a compliant Supreme Court, or a defiant executive, should the Supreme Court find its backbone and say, no, this is illegal, firing all these civil servants or whatever else the president might want to do is illegal. JD Vance said if that ever happens, the president should stand up to the Supreme Court and say, I dare you to enforce it, invoking Andrew Jackson when he defied a Supreme Court ruling that led to the eviction of Native Americans from their land. I am sure everyone can see why I wanted to have Adam Mockler on the show. Let's do this a lot more often. Adam, any final thoughts before we outro with this amazing video of you changing the heart and mind of a MAGA supporter?
Yeah, first of all, thank you for having me. I want to have a longer conversation soon, but with 20 days to go, it's a very uniquely packed schedule right now. But also, just to build off what you were saying, the only thing that scares me more than Trump getting into office is the idea of somebody like JD Vance having power and somebody like Elon Musk or Vivek Ramaswamy having power. Elon Musk is making the most obvious power grab ever. This dude bought a social media platform, basically like removed the community notes on his account and then posted AI videos of Kamala Harris. He gets community noted sometimes, but he posts AI videos of Kamala, no fact check. He's going to grab power and he would dismantle our institutions. Yeah, it would be terrible. But thank you for having me. I hope we collaborate in the future.
I'm sure
and we're
we
gonna do this
will,
again.
Adam. For those who haven't seen this amazing video, here's Adam doing his best.
What do you think about the funding of Ukraine?
No, I don't think that should happen.
Why not?
Because we need to take care of America first.
I'd make the argument that funding Ukraine is exactly how we put America first, because a lot of people think we're sending cash bags, but we're sending old military equipment, right? And after we send that military equipment, we get to create new American jobs to restock and repile that.
That's a good point.
On top of that, do you think Vladimir Putin's our enemy?
Not really.
Really, why not?
Because I think he's trying to run his own country. And he's not, I don't think he is a threat to America.
It's okay that he's running his own country, but the problem is when he starts to invade other countries next to him. So we should protect our allies, essentially, right?
I agree.
So
that's like us trying to invade Canada.
And that wouldn't be okay.
Right.
So to piece my argument together, we're creating new American jobs, and in the process, we get to protect an ally, a sovereign country, Ukraine, from, I think Vladimir Putin is a dictator. He's a threat. He's not a good guy. So I think we're protecting America's interests. I think this is exactly how we put America first, right? Can you see that point of view?
That is a very good point. That's a good point. You've educated me a lot. I appreciate that.
Awesome. And we're both coming from the same point of view of putting America first.
Right.
How can we put America first on the world stage? And sometimes it scares me when they say we put America first by letting Vladimir Putin do what he wants. That doesn't make sense.
Right. How old are you?
21.
You're very wise for your age.
Love this video? Make sure you stay up to date on the latest breaking news and all things Meidas by signing up to the MeidasTouch newsletter at MeidasTouch.com/newsletter.